So you're still asking them to receive in the end zone before they can finish. But the big difference is in the detail that you give to the players around what that looks like for them technically, because they have more space. So if I'm receiving in here, I'll have much more time to be able to turn, drive, and make decisions myself. Hi, I'm Emily Senior, Regional Coach Developer for the North East. This is a 6-week session program on passing and receiving for 12 to 16-year-olds. This is week 3 of your 6-week session program. Okay, so we're on week 3 this week, and we're going to be looking at taking some of those skills that we've taken from week 1 and week 2, revisiting some of those because it's really important that we do get repetitive with the same key messages throughout these 6 weeks so that players are really embedding them skills. This week we're going to kick it off with an arrival activity that we call Around the Clock. So we've got 3 players from 2 different teams just so that we're set up for the next practice to follow. So we've got yellows and blues here, but we've got 3 players on each cone set up around our diamond. So all that's going to happen for this practice is we're going to ask that the first player that's got the ball in line number 1 is going to pass the ball to their right. They're going to make a run to their left to join the line there. And simultaneously while that's happening, the player opposite where the ball has ended up is going to put some pressure on the player that's received. Now this player that's received is then going to do exactly the same pattern. They're going to pass to the right, they're going to make a run to their left, and once we get to that part, our next player should already be on the way to put pressure on the ball, and that will continue all the way around the clock. So pass right, run left, and the person opposite will put pressure on. Okay, so we're on practice 1 now of our week 3 session plan. So we've got 3 players on the outside of our area here, and then we've got 1 player that's trapped in this first third of our pitch, a second player for the same team trapped in our middle third of the pitch, and a third player trapped in our defensive third of the pitch. So what we've got in this situation is a 3v3 in essence, but we're giving our in possession team a lot more time to consider the decisions that they're making by keeping the opposition team trapped in spaces. So at times it will feel like a 3 versus 1 as they start to progress through the thirds. Now, this session and the whole of this week is based around making bright decisions on when to turn and where to receive with the ball. But we're starting to combine this with some of the information we've taken from week 1 as well, around connecting with teammates and timings of our run. So this team in blue are now going to be travelling into the space and seeing if they can start to create movements to be able to receive in some more advanced positions. So we can go into all of the spaces as a 3. The opposing team are going to come to put pressure on us. We have to make sure that we're scanning to see where those players are to be able to get into the best spaces possible to be able to receive and play forward. Now, it's really important at this point that we're starting to think about not only the movement of the players that are trying to come and receive after our next pass, but also the detail around the body shape of the player that is receiving. So all of the focus from the previous arrival activity with the diamond can come into play here. So when we're looking to receive and this player's putting pressure on us, how are we going to deceive the opponent to outwit them and make them feel as if we're going to take that negative touch backwards, but in reality, we're actually going to receive on the back foot to be able to play forward for our oncoming player to time their run perfectly to receive in behind and try and score a goal from it. Now, if we score, that's a point for our team. But if the opposition team do manage to intercept, then they can also score directly into the other goal. It's also important that you allow the out of possession team the reality of the game as well. They need some realism to it. So if they do manage to intercept us, let's say the middle third player manages to intercept the ball, all three of these players now have free roam of the pitch. So now that they're in possession, they can attack the same way that the Blues were attacking to try and come and attack this goal. And if they can score, then that's a point to them. So this is our final practice of week 3. We have a 4v4 matched up situation. You can see that we're involving keepers in this. You don't necessarily have to involve keepers if you don't have goalkeepers at your training session. That's absolutely fine. We can have outfield players playing in this game as well. It isn't going to change the principles of the game. Just allow for one of them to be in these end zones that we've set out in the area. You can see that we've got varied sizes of end zones. That's because we're going to give each team a completely different challenge depending on the direction that they're playing. So right now, our blue team are playing towards this goal, which means they have a very thin channel that they're trying to play into. What that means is there's going to be a very different demand on the players that are receiving in that area in comparison to the yellows that are receiving in a much larger space. We still all have to be thinking about the timing of our run, but the big difference is that when we do end up in this space, because it's much tighter, the receiving skills are going to be very different than if they were in the larger space. So when we receive the ball in this smaller space, we might be thinking about, are we receiving to try and finish first time before the keeper or opposition player can close us down? And if that can't happen, are we receiving to play it out to another player for them to be able to finish? As long as that first action in relation to the goal happens in the space, the goal will count. Now, if I'm on the yellow team, we have a very different challenge. We have a much larger space to go and exploit to be able to score the goal. Your explanation to the players, however, will be exactly the same as the Blues in terms of the structure of the session. So you're still asking them to receive in the end zone before they can finish. But the big difference is in the detail that you give to the players around what that looks like for them technically, because they have more space. So if I'm receiving in here, I'll have much more time to be able to turn, drive, and make decisions myself to be able to finish. So it's really important to note that with this practice, because there is a difference in the outcome that they'll get depending which direction that they're shooting in, that you want both teams to experience that at some point. I would recommend 6 minutes for the blue team in shooting this direction where they're receiving in the tighter space, and then flip them round so that yellows then get 6 minutes going in that direction and blues get 6 minutes going in the other direction. After that, to add a little extra challenge and to take it into what will feel like a more realistic gameplay for the players, allow them to have no real conditions. They can shoot and finish from anywhere across the pitch, but just to keep some focus around those end zones and the different demands that that brings out for them, the different outcomes it brings out for them, that if they do score in the end zones at this point, it's worth double points, just for that extra incentive to still want to go and receive in those end zone spaces. So a really good way for your players to think about the different outcomes and the different demands on them depending on the spaces that they're in is to really encourage your passing players to think about, when we have players receiving in tight spaces, we're often going to be playing into their feet directly. Whereas when we're shooting the opposite direction and we have lots of space to exploit, the passing player is very much going to be thinking about playing the ball into space for the player to come onto and receive the ball, which will add a lot of variety to the passing technique as much as it will for the receiving player. So our match day outcomes on week 3. So we've done a lot of work on this week at trying to bring a lot of the skills from both week 1 and week 2 together to really enhance our decision-making skills for our players. So they're the kind of things that we're looking out for on match day. What decisions are they making when they're on the ball? Are we looking to play into feet because we can see that we've got teammates that are in tight spaces, and what does that look like when they're receiving? Or are we looking to play into the spaces for teammates to be able to receive and exploit that a little bit differently?